As I've recently started going back through some Hitchcock films, started revisiting Hitchcock once more, and I've also been making my way through all the Best Picture Oscar winners, I thought I'd kill two birds with one stone and watch Rebecca, released in 1940 and winner of the Best Picture Academy Award in 1941. The film stars Laurence Olivier and Joan Fontaine in a story of a young woman who marries a widower only to find out that she must live in the shadow of his former wife, Rebecca, who died mysteriously several years earlier. The young wife must come to grips with the terrible secret of her husband, who's very cold, Max de Winter. She must also deal with the jealous, obsessed Mrs. Danvers, the housekeeper, who will not accept her as the mistress of the house. And Mrs. Danvers, of course, played by Judith Anderson. Now, this is an adaptation of a book by Daphne du Maurier, who her previous work that I've only seen adapted. I've never actually read her work, of course, because I'm a movie watcher. I'm not really a book reader, but the film that I've seen that has been based on her work was Don't Look Now, which was a very interesting film, quite a deep film. It was also quite a depressing film in many ways, was Don't Look Now. So again, that's another little kind of something I was expecting here, to be honest. But first and foremost, I knew I was coming to this. It was going to be like a period drama type thing. Hitchcock, not necessarily in his wheelhouse. Class, basically, a film about class, a story about class and class structure and all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of what you get for the first half of the film. So this woman, played by Fontaine, who is never given a name really in this. She's either called Darling or Mrs. De Winter, although she's kind of taking the place of the former Mrs. De Winter, so she never really feels like that is truly her identity, so to speak, which is purposeful, I think. You know, they don't want us to know this woman's name. She's living in the shadow of a woman who previously carried her new name, and by not giving us her actual name, it really impresses that upon us. But she doesn't come from Max de Winter's kind of background. You know, he's high class. He's lives in a big country manor. He's got loads of servants, loads of money. She essentially comes from rags. She starts off the film as basically a friend that you buy, so company basically. So she's accompanying this woman on her travels. This woman's paying her to just be with her, hang out with her, and be a friend essentially. But she's a really annoying character, the most annoying character in the whole film. Not the Fontaine character, this woman that's kind of paying her to be with her. Super annoying. Meant to be. Part of the humour of that character, I guess, or that's supposed to come out of the character, is that you are supposed to like find this woman really annoying. But what it also does is it tells us that she is moving from one life in which she doesn't really have anybody that is close to her, that isn't paying her to be close to her, and she moves from that into this marriage that, once it gets going, seems loveless, seems quite cold, seems like, again, she's living in the shadow of this other woman. So I think as a very deliberate choice there by the writers, whether that's du Maurier or the script writers, to have her working for this woman in this way. It kind of carries over to her marriage and her as a person and who she latches onto. But because of that, you always get the sense that she's a bit of a doormat. And even the way that she interacts with Max once she's married to him and when they're kind of falling in love at the start, you get the sense that she's a bit of a doormat and that she's chasing him more than he's chasing her. I mean, back in the day, I don't know if it would have been called out or whether it's just a modern a modern take, kind of looking back and going, oh, that didn't wash today, would it? Where, you know, he kind of implies that, he doesn't even imply, he kind of orders her to make her, like, make him breakfast and so, you know, get him a cup of coffee, and just the way it plays out is like, okay, that wouldn't wash today. But I don't know if that was a statement of intent within the film, within the story, to again show who this woman is. The fact that I think she's led more than she leads. Way too much of a forgiving nature, I would say, towards Max, given some of the things he does and given the way that he is with her sometimes, and the way other characters are with her as well. Like I say, we've got this character of Mrs. Danvers, played by Judith Anderson, and the way that Danvers talks to her at times, she would be well within her rights to have none of it, really, and say, listen, biatch, know your place. But she doesn't. She doesn't stand up for herself, and she's like that throughout the film. So many points during the film, she has the opportunity to stand up for herself, and she doesn't. I don't warm to her as much as I should. I think any warmth I have for her is because of the performance by Fontaine, who I really like in this. Despite the character's faults, I think the performance is good. There is a twist that comes midway in the tale, and I personally felt like it was an obvious twist. I was waiting for it, but I didn't expect it to come when it did. I thought it would come at the end of the movie. I thought that would be the big reveal. That distracted me a bit. I was kind of like, okay, where are they going to go now then? Because I thought this was where they were heading, and we've gotten there a little bit quick. So that surprised me, and I enjoyed the second half of the film a lot more than the first. I felt like the first half was a bit dull at times. Like I say, some of the characters' choices, some of the things they did kind of annoyed me a little bit. But then, like I say, when that twist comes, which I was expecting much later, I suddenly became interested, because I'm like, I want to know what they're going to do from here on out. And I found that stuff much more interesting. The character of Mrs. Danvers as well is also quite interesting, just because she's a dark character. She's, one might say, the villain of the piece, depending on your reading, and I'll go into that a bit more in a bit. But yeah, she's very much the devil's whisper in the ear of Fontaine's character. And then you've got Olivier's character, who, again, is quite cold throughout the film. And as the film goes on, we realise what that's all about. It kind of reshapes the way we look at him. I know Olivier's got a reputation. You know, a lot of people in the industry credit him as being one of the greatest actors of all time. And that he's very good here. He's very good playing this character who, for a lot of the time, is quite unsympathetic. For a lot of the time, as I say, you want to give him a slap and tell him to wake up, stop being such a cold, hard SOB. But in spite of that, he does manage to bring moments of warmth to the guy. And when we get certain reveals, you're kind of with him, even though you shouldn't necessarily be. As I say, the second half is the much better half, and I think that's because once we get to that point, it plays more like an actual Hitchcock film, a thriller, whereas the first half is more your Downton Abbey-esque, you know, Julian Fellows type kind of, yeah, upstairs, downstairs kind of stuff. And while I do like that kind of movie when it's done well, it's not what I expect from Hitchcock. And because of what was going on with a lot of the characters, I was getting a little bit bored. Now, I will go into some spoilers now. I mean, you know, for a film that's 84 years old, hello. But, you know, if you've never seen it before, just a warning, spoilers. I was thinking like a 3.5 out of 5 for this film. Like, after watching it, I was like, it wasn't the greatest Hitchcock, but, you know, it was all right. It was well made, this, that, and the other, and interesting in places. 3.5 out of 5. And when I went to Letterboxd just to kind of put my score in and maybe read what a few other people had said, one particular review caught me. So this isn't my theories or thinking, but I do wanted to give it a shout out just because I think it's quite an interesting take on the film. So again, like I say, spoilers, but there's a lot of stuff in here that suggests that Rebecca, the previous Mrs. De Winter, was actually a lesbian, and that she had a relationship with Mrs. Danvers. Hence the reason Mrs. Danvers is so dead set against anyone coming in and replacing her. I thought it was genuinely an interesting take. And I didn't feel like it was trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It actually made sense. And because of that, my score for the film actually went up. This is one of them instances where actually reading someone else's review made my score go up. Because I think it is an element of the film that is definitely there to be read if you want to read it that way. And I do think it enhances the film, but you don't have to read it into it if you don't. But I do think you miss something without that reading. I think it's interesting to see just why Rebecca was such a bitter person, knowing that she had this gay relationship with Mrs. Danvers, and that she had to keep it secret, that she lived in a society where you had to keep it secret. That does kind of tell us where her bitterness came from. Because even though we never get to meet Rebecca, she's always a presence throughout the film. And despite the fact that we never get to meet her, you feel like you know her. I personally get the sense that she was a crazy, bitter woman who seemed to hate everyone on some level. But when you just by putting that in there, just having that knowledge that, hang on, she had a gay relationship with Mrs. Danvers, it changes everything. It doesn't take away the bitterness. It doesn't stop her being a terrible human being, quite frankly, because she didn't have to go into this marriage. She didn't have to marry Max de Winter. She could have chose to live alone or go off and do her own thing. That was her choice. And I feel like making that choice was very unfair to Max and a lot of the other people around her. So it's definitely a complex character, even though we, like I say, we never get to meet her. Yeah, just adding an extra level of interest in a way that I often find these queer theories don't. Because they're often just shoehorned in just to try and make a film queer. Whereas here, I dare I say, would suspect that this was actually Hitchcock's intention. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was there in the book. Maybe just the scriptwriter brought it. Who knows? But I feel like somewhere along the line, somebody did bring that with that intention. But yeah, there you go. That's my thoughts on Rebecca. Like I say, 4 stars for me, just about. It's not my favourite Hitchcock. It's very solid. And I'm not sure I would have personally given it Best Picture for that year. I think my personal choice, and I've really not seen a lot of films from that year, so take this with a pinch of salt. But my personal choice would be His Girl Friday. Highly entertaining film that's just got a dynamite script, the back and two between the two leads, fantastic. But yeah, I think this is one that I can't imagine I'm going to want to revisit anytime soon, just because, as I say, that first half was like, whew, come on, get there faster. But definitely an interesting film that's got a lot going on underneath the surface, should you choose to look for it. But what about you? Have you seen Rebecca? And if so, do you think it was a worthy winner of the 1941 Best Picture Academy Award? And where do you think it sits amongst Alfred Hitchcock's filmography? One of his better films, mid-level, or lower tier. Leave your comments down below. Thank you for watching this review, and until next time, cracking.